Many hands make for light work. Teamwork makes the dream work. United we stand. Our culture is full of sayings about the powerful importance of working as a group, and there are many reasons for that. The most supreme of which is that teamwork is how humankind has climbed to the top of the food chain.
We take this for granted, but the reason that humans won planet Earth is because we're really good at working together. You know, we have kind of fragile bodies, but we have really good brains, and we have all these features that let us work together. So we built cities, we built civilization, we invented things. And when you look at the history of invention or innovation, basically nothing was invented alone. We're always building off of the work of other people, or we're working together. And the thing that I explored in the book is this idea that we say that two heads are better than one, but actually that's not usually true, but sometimes it is.
That's Shane Snow, an entrepreneur and author of the book Dream Teams, Working Together Without Falling Apart.
Two heads are better than one when those heads think differently enough in different ways. And so the benefit of working in a team, it's usually not there. Most of the time we'll be more productive, more creative than if we're in a group that slows us down or where there's dynamics that make us, not quite as effective together. Most big things require a lot of people, so we're sort of forced to do group work. But some groups actually do manage to exceed the sum of their parts, and those are the groups that manage to harness the different ways of thinking that their members have.
That's the essential point at the heart of Snow's book. We usually aren't using groups to their fullest potential, but we could be. So why is it that most teams and organizations struggle to succeed beyond its individual parts?
We slow down because we've got to coordinate. Social dynamics mean that we'll hold back a little bit, even subconsciously. Most of the time, the group is not going to be super additive. It's not going to be more than the sum of its parts. Most of the time, we just have a big job to do, so we work together. How you know when you're getting better, the key ingredient that is always present when a group is adding up to more is actually not getting along. It's not, peace and harmony and unity and just being like, yes, and agreeing and being all excited. It's actually something called cognitive friction. It's when you don't get along, but you don't get along well. That makes sense. So if your group is too much in agreement, if you're very, unified and happy, then that's the time to step back and say, well, we're not having dissent, we're not having disagreement, we're not pushing ourselves as hard as we can be.
Snow says that groups really get clicking when they're experiencing a constant push and pull. He says this push and pull is what makes improv comedy so fun.
When you watch comedians on stage invent, a skit or a show on the fly, it's not because they're rehearsed that makes it so funny and so great. It's because someone throws out something that's really random or different, and then someone comes in and turns it into something even better, and then the other person turns that into something even better. That's the feeling that you get when you have this sort of magical synergistic team. And if you're not feeling that, then probably you're leaving potential on the table. A team that's unified and happy is going to be good, but it's not going to be amazing without that cognitive friction, without those different ideas doing battle.
So why are groups that are full of friction successful? Snow says it boils down to what's called cognitive diversity, which is the idea of having an array of varied ideas.
There's two dimensions that I talk about in the book of if you break down what's sort of our mental toolkit that leads to cognitive diversity. You can sort of say that everyone has a set of perspectives that they see the world through, that anything that you encounter, you sort of encode it in your head from your perspective. If you have a group of people that have different perspectives because they grew up differently, because they identify differently, they've been treated or included or excluded in different things throughout their lives, or you've just lived different experiences, then you'll have different perspectives. You'll look at a situation differently. So if you and I walk down the street and we see a building burning down, if your house once burnt down and you had to escape the fire, you're going to see that building burning down from a very different perspective than me, who I've never been through that. And there's all sorts of things that can lead to this, and this is where, visible diversity actually leads to cognitive diversity. Two people who come from different backgrounds, who are different generations, one's older, one's younger, they're different races, they're different genders. Just living your life, being who you are, will lead you to develop different perspectives. The other half of cognitive diversity is what's called heuristics, which is basically a fancy way of saying how you approach problem solving. So the way that you've grown up and all of these things I just talked about can lead you to having different strategies for approaching problems, or just how you're trained, where you go to school, If we went to school for the same subject but in different places, we might have developed different sets of heuristics or skills to approach problems.
Snow says a perfect example of heuristics put into action can be seen on our police forces. Specifically, he says it shows itself in police partnerships between a man and a woman.
I studied cops. When you have a male cop and a female cop, and you give them both the same problem of getting through a locked door, it's more likely that a male cop, not always, but it's more likely that a male cop will try and force the door open, kick it down. But it's more likely that a female cop will try and figure out who has the key and compromise that person. And the reason this is more likely is because if you grow up with less upper body strength than your peers, in school and in college and in the police academy, then you realize that your strategy for getting through a locked door or getting through anything that requires strength might actually be to go around and find a different way to do it, which is why police partnerships that have men and women in the partnership tend to do better at problem solving because they bring different sets of strategies just naturally from how they grew up. Now, this is not to say that everyone, just because you're in one category or another, means that you will develop different strategies, but it increases the likelihood of this happening. So that's what cognitive diversity is about. What's in our head sort of manifesting into how we navigate the world.
When you throw cognitive diversity into a big group setting, Snow says you will usually get better results than teams built on similar viewpoints being united. Such is the story of the Wu-Tang Clan, one of the most successful hip-hop groups of all time. Snow says, on paper, the group didn't seem like it would work. It was a collection of 9 rappers from different backgrounds that even crossed gang lines. Initially, Snow says there was so much distrust that a few of the members brought guns with them to the recording studio. It seemed like a recipe for disaster.
What they did that was so interesting is the RZA, who's kind of the de facto leader, he basically channeled that friction and aggression into this competition that helped them make everyone better. There's also this component, too, that beneath the surface, all of them were very different kinds of musicians. One guy was really aggressive, one guy liked cooking metaphors, and one guy was really emotional and sort of a slower rapper, and they all had these different styles of what they thought made good hip-hop music. And so he got them to combine all of that. Basically what he did is he would make a song, like the music part of the song, the beat, and he'd say, all right, show up to the studio with your best material, and you're going to compete to see who gets to be on this part of the record or on this part of the song. And so they'd come and they would, instead of fighting each other, they would battle each other with their craft, their lyrics. And this was the way that he channeled this sort of friction and all the different things that they had. And they put it all together, and these guys literally changed music history. Between them all now, they've sold nearly 100 million records.
And the success of this competition isn't limited to rap. It's the same thing that happened in George Washington's presidential cabinet, which is central to the musical Hamilton. A bunch of politicians from different backgrounds came together, and though they didn't get along, they built a nation on that friction. Snow says this strategy is also what led to much of Abraham Lincoln's successes.
I actually did a study of presidents in history for my first book a few years ago, and what made the difference between presidents that are ranked higher by historians and ranked lower. And, Lincoln's at the very top, and in part because he was very good at working with people who were not like him, taking their advice, changing course when necessary, all towards this vision of making this a great place for people to live and to come to.
So if difference of opinion can make groups great, why is modern America in such a fractured state? Snow says the push and pull of cognitive diversity is only effective if we're all willing to actually listen to the other side, the way Abraham Lincoln and the Wu-Tang Clan were.
There's a lot of research into something called intellectual humility, which is sort of the cousin of open-mindedness, which is basically the more that we can develop respect for other people's different viewpoints, the more we can separate our ego from our need to be right about things, which are hard things to do. And we all think that we can do it, but we're all, not as good as we could be. The more we can develop those kinds of things, even if we don't agree with people, but if we can respect their viewpoint, suddenly the conversations we have around things like politics or what we should do with our streets and our communities or how we interact with our spouses can change.
Shane Snow's book, Dream Teams, is available now. For more information about all of our guests, visit our site at viewpointsonline.net. We have an archive of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm Gary Price.